We're going to now deal with solving a quadratic equation using the quadratic formula. So I'm going to derive that formula. So to start with, the basic quadratic equation looks like this. ax squared plus bx plus c is 0, where a, b, and c are real numbers. As a first step, we want to, before we can complete the square, we want the x squared and x terms on one side and the number on the other. So we'll get ax squared plus bx is negative c. So as a next step, we're going to divide by a because we want a 1x squared. That gives us the equation x squared plus b over ax is negative c over a. Now I have to complete the square. So I have x squared plus b over a times x. And I'm going to add something, and I'm going to get x plus two terms that are going to, when double, give me b over ax. So we have to take half of b over a. So half of b over a is b over 2a. So I have to put b over 2a in both. In doing that, I see that I am going to have to multiply the last terms to see what gets added. So it's b over 2a times b over 2a, which becomes b squared over 4a squared. So I have to add b squared over 4a squared. So that's what I put here, b squared over 4a squared plus b squared over 4a squared. We now have to add the same to both sides. The whole purpose of doing that is to write this as a quantity squared. And we know from here that that's x plus half of that b over a is b over 2a. And now what I need to do is add these two fractions. To add these, I have to make it a 4a squared. So I have a 4a from both. So right here, I'm going to have, I have negative 4ac over 4a squared plus b squared over 4a squared. Since these both have the same denominator, I'm going to write x plus b over 2a. That squared is, I'm going to put the b squared first. So it's b squared minus 4ac all over 4a squared. We're now ready to use the square root method. With the square root method, we take the square root of both sides. We write that square root squared, x plus b over 2a equals plus or minus, I put these square roots separately. So a square root of the top, b squared minus 4ac over square root of 4a squared. I now can simplify the square root of 4a squared here. So this is plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a, because square root of 4 was a 2, square root of a squared an a. And I get x plus b over 2a is plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. We're almost there. Now to solve for x, we subtract b over 2a. That gives us that x is minus b over 2a plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. But because these are the same denominators, we get to write them as one fraction. We get to say that our solution is x is negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, both of those over 2a. And this is what we call the quadratic formula. And what that means, if we go back to the beginning, when we start with the equation ax squared plus bx plus c, you must start that it equals 0. Then you can now use this formula to get the two solutions to that equation. Now we'll work a couple of examples for you to see how we use this formula. We'll go to the next page. Our first example, let's say we want to solve for x, 2x squared minus 4x equals 1. And I want you to use the quadratic formula. The first thing that you have to be aware of, unlike the complete the square, where we like to have a number on the other side of the equal sign, for the quadratic formula you must have 0 on one side. So we have to write this 2x squared minus 4x minus 1 is 0. Once you have 0, then you identify a is the coefficient of x squared, which is 2. B is the coefficient of x, which is negative 4. And c is negative 1. We're going to put that in the quadratic formula, which is minus b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. The way I think of this, when I see minus b, I think of it as the opposite of b. So I think of it as the opposite sign of whatever b is. I'll show you how I work this out. I say x is the opposite of b, the opposite of negative 4 is 4, plus or minus the square root of, no matter whether b is positive or negative, when you square it, you're going to get a positive, 16. Then I definitely put in minus 4 times a is 2 and c is negative 1. I definitely put those in the parentheses for multiplication, and then divided by 2 times a, which is 2. This step where I write minus 4 times this is important because it keeps the correct sign between them. Now in working this out, I get x is 4 plus or minus the square root of 16 minus a minus is plus. So this is 16 plus 8 all over 4. So this is 4 plus or minus radical 24 over 4. I can't leave radical 24. I have to go through and simplify the radicals, think about what pairs come out of jail, all that. So I get 24 and I look at the factors. 2 goes into that 12, 2 goes into that 6, 2 goes into that 3, 3 goes into that 1. And we see a 2 comes out and we're left with 2 times 3 is 6. That gives me now that x is 4 plus or minus 2 radical 6 over 4. And normally you might think that you're finished, but in this case it can be simplified further. And the way we simplify this is we factor first before we reduce. We can't reduce unless you can factor a number from both terms of the numerator. And it turns out I can factor out a 2, and I'm left with 2 into 4, 2. 2 into 2 radical 6 plus or minus radical 6 over 4. Once I've done that, then I see I can only cancel after I factored, and then this 2 cancels with this. And once you've canceled, you cannot do it again. So the final result is 2 plus or minus radical 6 over 2. I can't cancel these 2's. It already had been canceled. And this becomes the final answer.